I've introduced Peter before today, so I mean, he's a longtime researcher and investigator, and he's going to continue reading the paper that I read part of for him.
Okay, here we go. You can go. I'm going to hang up.
I gather that I'm picking up on my talk from where John left off this morning. Let me try to just briefly recap what I do in the opening pages. I'm trying to show that there is a standard practice in America of if we go to war, there is some kind of provocation, deception plot first to make us think that we're going to war. Excuse me, what is that phone? This is horribly embarrassing. Get, well, we'll just have to live with that. What did I do?
Senior moment.
Well, I'm going to have to just live with that noise. As I was saying, that we've had a number of wars since 1959, and virtually every major war except one was preceded by a provocation, deception plot, which we can lay at the doors of what I loosely call the American war machine, involving people both inside and outside government, and for that matter, inside and outside the United States. The exception sort of proves the rule. It was Afghanistan in 1980 when America got involved in a proxy war with Russia in Afghanistan, and that war began with a series of provocations, not deceptions, provocations by the United States in Afghanistan, which Brzezinski was later boasted about to a French newspaper. So, in the context of all these provocation deception plots, it seems to me I have to look very closely at what happened in connection with the Kennedy assassination. We see that there were deceptions post-assassination. That doesn't prove anything about the motivation of the assassination. But I was very interested in the Costin letter because, which turned up, the timing of it was extraordinary. It was mailed so close to November 22nd that Hosty in Dallas never saw it, was never able to do anything about it until after Kennedy had been assassinated, and he walked back to his office and he found the Costin letter waiting for him. Now, if it had arrived before, he might have taken Oswald into custody, and that, of course, would have required a completely different plot for what happened on November 22nd. So the timing is suspicious. The Warren Commission tried to defend to assert that the letter was authentic and Oswald's, because Ruth Paine came forward after the assassination with a draft which appeared to be in Oswald's handwriting. But Jerry Rose did a brilliant essay in which he, like myself, we independently concluded that the draft of the letter was something that was invented to validate the Costin letter. The spelling is, there are 6 examples of words correctly spelled in the draft, which are then misspelled in the final letter. There's a problem with the postmark. Anyway, those of us who know the Kennedy assassination know that other things brought forward by Ruth Paine in the wake of the assassination, like the note about killing Walker, or a bus ticket from Mexico, which was later proved to be a forgery. That's all in the area of dubious evidence. So that's why I think it's so important to see that although the Stringfellow note saying that Oswald had been to Cuba and was a Communist Party member, although it seems crazy, it's a kind of craziness which fell within the parameters of other crazy things which the Joint Chiefs were proposing at that time to justify a war against Cuba. Now, let me finish my paper. I devoted a whole chapter of my book, Deep Politics, to the Dallas Police Army Intelligence Connection. But I now think that I seriously misinterpreted its significance by seeing its Phase 1 propensity as an example of right-wing Texas divergence from the Phase 2 inclination of those responsible for running the country. Today we know that the Phase 1 zeal in Dallas to implicate Castro by the use of deceptive falsehoods had also characterized the Joint Chiefs in Washington. It is now clear that Stringfellow's claims about Oswald as a Communist Party visitor to Cuba, although clearly false, did not exceed the parameters for a provocation deception as set out in the Northwoods and May 1963 documents. All this Cuban deception planning was in support of JCS Op Plans 312, air attack in Cuba, and 316, invasion of Cuba. These were not theoretical exercises, but actively developed operational plans which the JCS were only too eager to execute. If they told Kennedy, quote, "We are not only ready to take any action you may order in Cuba, we are also in an excellent condition worldwide to counter any Soviet military response to such action." Any Soviet military response
I sure
to
will.
such
Thanks,
action.
Bob.
Words, they were prepared for a nuclear strike against Soviet Russia, even though the JCS, as Air Force General Leon Johnson told the National Security Council in September 1963, believed this would probably result in, quote, at least 140 million fatalities in the USSR, close quote, not counting a large number from fallout in the entire Northern Hemisphere. Now, at the peak of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, according to Khrushchev's memoir, Robert Kennedy told the Russian ambassador, Anatoly Dobrinin, quote, "The president is in a grave situation and does not know how to get out of it. We are under very severe stress. In fact, we are under pressure from our military to use force against Cuba. If the situation continues much longer, the president is not sure that the military will not overthrow him and seize power. The American army could get out of control," close quote. This leads us to perhaps the most serious and also complex of the parallels between 11/22, the JFK assassination, and 9/11, that each was promptly followed by one of the two longest wars, Vietnam and Afghanistan, in U.S. history. Analyzed a little more closely, we see that in each deep event, one, there were powerful elements inside and outside government pressing for war against Cuba in 1963 and against Iraq in 2001. Two, plans for escalation or war were promptly initiated by NASM 273 on Vietnam on November 26, 1963, and by the overt invasion of Afghanistan in October 2001. Three, in each case, the difficult direct war originally pushed for was sidelined, permanently in the case of Cuba, only temporarily in the case of Iraq, and planning for a direct invasion was displaced by planning for a different and easier intervention against a softer target, Vietnam or Afghanistan, in conjunction with local proxies. In 1963-64, Johnson clearly turned a cold shoulder to the insistent pressures from the Joint Chiefs and others for war against Cuba. Yet just before Christmas 1963, Johnson told the Joint Chiefs, quote, "Just get me elected and then you can have your war," close quote, meaning Vietnam. Daniel Ellsberg has recorded how throughout 1964, U.S. planners, despite public assurances to the contrary, were driven by the conviction that defeat in Vietnam, quote, could be averted even in the relatively short run only by a direct U.S. combat role, close quote. The same substitution of countries occurred in 2001. Cheney and Rumsfeld, as signers for a project for the New American Century position paper, had called as early as 1997 for action to unseat Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Nevertheless, when Bush signed secret orders for action 5 days later, his orders called for an immediate plan of military support for the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan and only, quote, to begin planning military options for an invasion of Iraq, close quote. There were, in fact, no credible pretexts to justify attacking either Cuba or Iraq. Attacks on these primary targets would, moreover, have been premature. In neither country did the conditions yet exist for an invasion to be popularly supported and successful. But in both cases, the talk of an invasion in country one may, by its very extremity, have facilitated the lesser decision for an intervention with allies in country two, just as the Pentagon, in order to obtain a $10 billion budget item, is accustomed to ask first for $20 billion. The setting for the lesser decision may finally have been intended to reinforce the image Johnson needed in 1963 that he was continuing Kennedy's policies, and the image Bush needed in 2001 that he was respectful of the razor-thin mandate given him by the bitterly contested 2000 election. We say he won by one vote, the vote of Clarence Thomas in the Supreme Court. Both presidents were put into office by events that were extraordinary, and both presidents needed a cloak of moderation to mask how they were in fact leading this country into major wars. To repeat what I said at the outset, both 11/22, JFK, and 9/11 are deep events which have deeply affected this country, with consequences far greater than could have been achieved by just 19 Arabs or one disgruntled ex-Marine. But one of the neglected similarities between the two deep events is that in both cases the changes were accomplished behind misleading promises of continuity, Johnson's, quote, let us continue, close quote, and Bush's assurances on 9/11 that the terrorist attacks, quote, cannot touch the foundation of America, close quote. Now for my conclusion. Let me close by clarifying what I am not saying and also what I am saying. I am saying that elements of the American war machine, whether inside the government or outside it, contributed to both 11/22 and 9/11, and they did so because of their interest in promoting a major war. I am not saying that the American government did this. In point of fact, there are features of both events suggesting that in both cases, personnel of foreign intelligence agencies may also have been involved. The American war machine is so complex, so pervasive in our society, that to blame it for these events is almost as vague and as open-ended as the chapter heading in my earlier book, Deep Politics, for which I have been ridiculed, that, quote, the deep political system, close quote, killed John F. Kennedy. My conclusion does not try to identify individual culprits. It tries to identify and help define a systemic process of deception events. Still less am I implying that the scenarios of 11/22 and 9/11 were extracted and dusted off from some master conspiracy theory residing in someone's safe. What I am describing, as I said at the outset, or John said for me, is a predictable socio-dynamic that occurs when leaders of an expansive quasi-democratic state are persuaded there is a need for an illegal war, a need which they know their public will not understand. In discussing 11/22 and 9/11, we lack the evidence to blame these events narrowly on the U.S. government, Pentagon, CIA, Army Intelligence Reserve, or any other specific agency. It is my belief, however, that we can blame them on the American war machine, whether inside or outside, and some element in the American war machine, whether inside or outside government, whether inside or outside the United States. And in this sense, I believe we can describe each event, the JFK assassination and the attacks of September 11, as being an inside job. There are still many Americans who will be shocked by this statement, even deeply offended. But my own faith in America's ultimate decency and my hopes for America's ultimate future depend on our being able to come to understand how America's policies have been perverted by forces including the military-industrial complex in its midst. Thank you very much. That's my talk.
Can you hear you?
I'm getting a message. I think he's. Hi, this is Joe Green at COPA. If you get this,
I'm waiting for
give us a
questions.
call. 210-705-9917.
Yeah, Rachel?
Peter, do you have evidence or ties of our favorite subjects, Tony Kubek and Robert Morris, with Jack Crichton?
He's got to hang up his phone.
He'll figure it out.
If you have the, where can you get to another line?
Question. He might have just.
Oh, okay. I might have another line for him.
He might have just hung up.
Did he just hang up?
Well, he didn't put the phone down, but he might have pressed the thing on the.
I'll try it again.
Looks like he's waiting on a line for you.
No. I'll try it again.
Now he's hanging up.
Is he?
With his right hand.
Oh.
Let's see if his other phone's open.
Peter?
There he goes.
No, he's trying to call
Oh,
you.
he's trying to call me. Okay.
Hang on, hang on.
Maybe.
Oh, and I just hung up on him.
Hello?
This delay is terrible.
You got the other one.
Hello?
Pay no attention to the man on the screen.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll just try it again.
Delay is horrible.
Yeah, it's like a 20-second delay or something.
Hello? Oh, this is Joe again. Sorry, there was a problem with the phone, but we're good now. We do have some questions for you. I'm going to give you over to John.
Hello?
Hi, Peter.
Who is this?
No, it's been going all right. Don't worry about it. It was just it was one of the least complicated speaker problems we've had. Rachel here is asking whether you can make any connection or know
What a fiasco.
of connections between Tony Kubek
Okay,
and
the
Robert
reason-
Morris and Jack Crichton. You need the speaker. Or maybe he'll hear him from there. Okay.
Well, that's a good question. Certainly it's easy to connect Anthony Kubek to Robert Morris. Kubek was a professor at the University of Dallas, which was headed by Robert Morris, who was very, without getting into the details, part of that kind of right-wing circle that included the we got a delay here. I'm being interrupted by myself. Robert Morris was part of the sort of John Birch Society of right-wing people in Dallas and elsewhere. Yes, it would be very nice if I could tie him directly to Jack Crichton. I can't. However, for reasons that are too complicated to go into here, Jack Crichton, and this is actually, I had a section on this in my talk, which I cut out for the sake of links. Jack Crichton was part of what I call the Dallas overworld. He was an oil man. He knew other oil men. Both he and Mamantoff had connections to the Pugh family. J. Gordon Pugh was one of the original members of the John Birch Society and a backer of the Young Americans for Freedom. So the spirit of the question is, are all these people part of a kind of what I would call overworld consensus far to the right of Kennedy? And the answer would be yes.
Yeah.
Ask
Just a second.
Professor Scott about name some names of foreign intelligence agencies possibly involved in the JFK assassination, please.
They're asking whether you have any idea of the names of foreign intelligence agencies connected to the John F. Kennedy assassination.
I'm very interested. By the way, John, if you could put your hand over the phone, the ear of your phone, it's very difficult for me to answer because I'm competing against my own voice down there. Yes, I'm thinking particularly of French intelligence. There's been the CIA came in with a report that a man called Sweat was there who had been involved with the attempts in France to assassinate de Gaulle. And then we got a flurry of other reports saying, no, it wasn't Sweat, it was Michel, it was a man called Merz, an American and not a Frenchman. For reasons which involve Angleton's connections to the OAS and a man who didn't make it into my short version of this talk, but is a man with connections to the Crichton Military Intelligence Reserve Unit, a man called, he was called Topaz in Leon Uris's novel. His real name was Thierry de Vaugelis, and he was a part of STEC, the French intelligence service. He was apparently connected with the pro-OAS elements in French intelligence, and he was certainly very close to Angleton. So when I say that I'm interested in a French intelligence connection, it's because of my interest in Angleton and my interest in the 488th Intelligence Unit. But I think
You hear me?
short of sitting down at a table and opening up a bottle of wine and having a long talk, I'll just have to leave it at that for now.
Okay, Chris, what?
Yeah, just a footnote question. He mentioned the plans 312 and 360 by the Joint Chiefs. What book is that published in, just so I can find it?
Yes,
Someone's asking about 312 and
and I can hear
360. the
myself,
plan.
unfortunately. Yes, the first plan was for an air attack. The second plan was for an invasion. You have to understand that it's the job of the J5, of the planning section of the Joint Chiefs or of any Army unit, to have these plans available. I think actually it was Sink Lant that was working on the plans. So they had a plan for what they would do if they invaded Cuba. They had a plan for a possible air attack Doesn't mean that they were going to do it. Now, if we, my reading of the interesting material that Waldron and Hartman have come up with, and most recently in Legacy of Secrecy, is that there were people in the American government hoping that there would be a coup in Cuba before the end of '63, and that this would lead shortly to an American invasion. And I think I've quoted in my short version of this talk from the document that said if there was a coup, America would send first a team representing CIA, DOD, and state to assess whether it had the backing of the people. What they really meant, I think, is whether the Cuban army would support the coup. Even if the head of the Cuban army, Juan Almeida, had led a coup, it didn't mean that the army was sure to follow. And then after that, if the team that was infiltrated to assess the coup decided it was successful, then there would be an invasion. So they had to have everything planned. And they also probably, as part of the plan, I haven't read the plan myself, but I can imagine there were, elements already predisposed, put to strategic locations to come in on short notice. The existence of a plan doesn't mean a decision to invade, but the documents I'm quoting from show that all through 1963, it was very much on the minds of the Joint Chiefs. And also, may I say, that the linkage between an invasion of Cuba and a possible war with the thousands of Soviet military who were still in Cuba, which would mean war with the Soviet Union, there was a linkage between those two things, and I don't know to what extent the plans dealt with that.
Ronnie?
How can this or these secret governments be outed to the American people through the mass media curtain? By what strategy and how long might this take, or can it be done at all?
How could these secret government elements you're talking about be exposed through the mass media, and or can it be done? How long would it take, or can it be done at all?
Are we talking about doing it now?
Yes.
I'm not quite sure. Is it you talking about doing it then in '63 or doing it
Now, how do we do it now?
Now.
I've been trying all my life to expose these elements. I've got as far as the people in the room at COPA. By the way, I want to say hello to all my friends at COPA. That was part of the beginning of my talk that I didn't get to give.
Okay. Another question? Yeah.
Well, Peter, in your book, Deep Politics, you talk about the American Security Council, you talk about the China lobby, the Israel lobby, and I just see that you have the Lansky book there and the connections with Jesus Angleton and Permidex. That's it, thank you.
Say it again. I'll try. There was so many things I couldn't remember. He sees the books behind you.
Well, I just see the Lansky book, and I know in your Deep
Or
Politics,
Lansky.
you talk about the American Security Council,
Permidex,
the
American
China
Security
lobby,
Council, China
and the
lobby.
Israel lobby,
Israel lobby.
and Permidex,
Permidex.
and then the connection Angleton had to
Connection Angleton
to them.
To them. He's just making a comment about it, I guess.
Well,
That's your book?
just yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, more the connection of Lansky and Permidex, the French connection, and the Israeli
Lansky,
connection
Permidex, the French connection, and the Israeli connection.
through the
is what
Mossad.
you're saying. And the
So
Mossad.
Angleton was
And
in charge of
Angleton.
the CIA desk. Okay.
Right. Are we talking about books or about the lobbies that were behind the Kennedy assassination?
Yes,
I'm not sure.
the lobby's behind. Participant, collateral beneficiaries of.
I see. Well, there's a kind of global intelligence milieu, and you've left out some. Taiwan, for example. I myself, in this book, I don't know if you can see my new book, American War Conspiracy. The China lobby in American history books is sort of peters out after 1954, but I show that it was really, in effect, continued money from the drug traffic in Southeast Asia, which is a lot of my book is about, funded continuation of anti-Beijing and pro-Taiwan activities. And I actually track how that money reached from Thailand to both political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And that money was very much present in 1963. And if you read the whole of my book, my new book, American War Machine, I have never been very keen on Permindex. There was a Permindex and it was involved in intelligence activities, but I think it was inserted into discussion of the Kennedy assassination at a point when people were trying to discredit Garrison. And, one of the first sources for that Permindex story actually happened to be in Montreal, which is my hometown. And when I went back to Montreal one year, I talked to the man who received the story, and he always said it was very odd. It was sort of phoned in. He didn't know where it was coming from. I then put it in my special basket for stories which turn up at a convenient moment to further muddy the waters of the Kennedy assassination. An example being the draft of the Costin letter, which Ruth Paine discovered in her house just when people were beginning to doubt the authenticity of the typed Costin letter.
Yeah.
My real question, I guess, is that my brother's father-in-law flew LBJ, and Kennedy wasn't going to give nukes to Israel after they killed him. We did. And he also was going to knock out the China nuclear program a month after they killed him. But, of course, he didn't get to do that. So, somewhere there.
His brother's father-in-law flew LBJ, and something about Kennedy refusing to give nuclear weapons to Israel.
Right.
And
And he was going to take out the Chinese
going to
nuclear
take out
program a
the
month after
Chinese
they killed
nuclear
him.
program a month after they killed him.
Yes, I've heard both those stories, and it's certainly true. I think that if we were looking for what would have been an issue dividing Kennedy and Israel in '63, it probably would have been the question of nuclear weapons. I've heard those stories. I've not been in a position, I can't do everything, and I have not been able to acquire the kind of depth of background to assess those stories. For me, I'm not for some people, I'm sure, but for me, they're still in the category of what I call single source stories, and therefore I don't talk about them until I've managed to get a thorough grounding of it coming from different sources, and so I'm not really in a position to comment on either of those.
Thank you.
Yes, we didn't expect any, but the problem was that we had absolutely no internet. Yeah.
No, John, I have to say this, it's on my chest. I wish you would pre-record it as I asked you to. I asked you to record it in advance, and you said not to worry, there wouldn't be any problem. Well, I did, John, there's harassment here. How could you not expect it? How could you not? Yes, but it wasn't me.
It wasn't me.
Bye-bye.
I said because it had worked in the past, he said it wasn't me.
I'm doing a broadcast, for Christ's sake. Oh, it didn't. Well, put it back on or something. Okay.
I'm attempt to get in his domestic life. Frazzled from all this. We are too. All right. So we're going to break for dinner, try and come back around 7 still. And there's West End restaurants, or you can eat downstairs, whatever people want to do. Joe, what number did you call him when I wanted to call him back? Can you just ring me back?
Yeah, just tell him he's okay, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.